The bell of the Mixed Worlds Academy was an old, ugly thing. It hung from a rusted iron arm above the front gates, and it did not ring so much as clang, like someone hitting a pot with a hammer. When it sounded that morning, Tully was still 10 steps from the gate, and the noise made him flinch. He hurried as best he could. His back leg dragged a little. He kept his head low. Gar was leaning against the stone post with his 3 friends around him. He was a young Corthel, taller than most students his age, with bright green scales and a row of small spines along his jaw. He saw Tully coming. He smiled slow. "Look who is here," Gar said in a loud voice. 3-legged Tully. Late again. The other 3 laughed. There was a thin PLYEH boy with twitching face tendrils. There was a stocky Brennet girl with horns. There was a smaller Corthel who copied everything Gar did. Tully did not look up. He kept walking, eyes on the ground. He had learned that looking up made it worse. "Come on, broken step," Gar said, stepping into his path. "Say good morning." "Good morning," Tully whispered. "Louder. We could not hear you. Maybe your ears are broken too." "Good morning," Tully said again. The Brennet girl snorted. The PLYEH boy hopped from foot to foot. Gar leaned down very close, until his green snout was almost touching Tully's small feathered face. "You should not be here," Gar said softly. "You know that, right? You're kind, with legs like that. In the old days they would have left you in the snow." Tully said nothing. His eyes were wet, but he did not let the tears fall. He had practiced. The school bell clanged a second time. Gar stepped aside, bored for now. Tully limped past him as fast as he could, into the courtyard, and toward the classroom. The first hours of school were quiet. Tully sat at the back. The teacher, a tired old PLYEH with gray skin, droned through a lesson about Federation history. Tully did not listen. He opened his notebook and he drew. He drew an old man with a cane sweeping a porch. He drew a woman with flour on her hands and a kind face. He drew a quiet man watching a door. He drew a woman with 2 metal tags around her neck. He drew another man fixing a small clock. He drew them all small and careful. He did not know their full names, but he knew their faces. When the bell for recess rang, Tully closed his notebook and tried to walk out quietly. He almost made it. In the courtyard, under the wide blue shade tree, Gar was waiting. So were the others. "Tully," Gar called in a sweet voice. "Come here. Come sit with us." Tully stopped. He could turn around and go back inside, but the teacher had locked the classroom. He could go to the headmaster's office, but he had tried that before. Once. He still remembered how the headmaster had only sighed and told him to try harder to fit in. So Tully walked over. Slowly. His back leg dragged. "Sit," Gar said. Tully sat on the stone bench. The 4 of them stood around him. They did not hit him at first. They were smarter than that. They started with words. "How does your mother feed you?" the Brennet girl asked. "She is a cleaner. They earn nothing." "Your father is dead, right?" said the PLYTH. "What did he die of?" "Embarrassment." Gar laughed loudest at that one. Tully's hands trembled in his lap. He held his notebook tight against his chest. "What is in there?" Gar asked. "Nothing." "Show me. Please. Show me." Gar reached out and pulled the notebook from Tully's hands. Tully made a small sound, like a bird stepped on. Gar opened the notebook. He flipped through the pages. He stopped at the drawing of the 5 old humans. "What is this?" he said. His voice changed. There was disgust in it now. "Humans? You are drawing humans." "They are kind to me," Tully whispered. "They are filth," Gar said. "Do you know what they are? Old killers. My grandfather told me. They came to our world. They burned half of it. And now they live here, and they sweep porches because no one else will let them in." He tore the page. He tore another. He tore another. Tully reached for the notebook. The smaller Corthel pushed him back down on the bench. The Brennet girl took Tully's lunch, the small bundle of green paper his mother had wrapped that morning, and dropped it on the ground. She stepped on it. The paper crushed flat. Something soft inside made a wet sound. Gar threw the torn pages on the dirt. He kicked one. He looked at Tully. "Cry," Gar said. "Go on. Cry, 3-legged." Tully did not cry. He just sat very still and stared at his ruined lunch and his ruined drawings. A small PLYTH girl with pale blue skin was watching from the classroom window. She turned and ran down the hall, all the way to the headmaster's office. She knocked. She told him, in a shaking voice, what was happening in the courtyard. Headmaster Olin looked up from his desk. He walked to the window. He looked down at the courtyard for 3 full seconds. Then he sat back down at his desk and picked up his pen. "Children play rough sometimes," he said to the girl. "Go back to class." That afternoon, Tilly walked home alone at dusk. His lip was cut. His drawings were crumpled in his arms in pieces. His limp was worse. He walked past the tea house. He did not look up. He did not want Mr. Bram to see him like this. But from the porch, behind a cup of tea gone cold, Bram saw everything. And from the corner inside, motionless, Dalton saw everything too. Night came down on Harith Minor like a tired blanket. The lamps in the colony square flickered on one by one, weak yellow lights that did not quite reach the ground. A cold wind moved through the streets. The shops were closing. The market was being packed away. In a small one-room home on the back lane behind the academy, a small lamp burned low. Senna pushed open the wooden door. Her arms ached. Her hooves were sore. She had cleaned 11 classrooms tonight and 3 sets of stairs and the long hallway by the office that Headmaster Olin liked to walk on. She had not eaten since morning. The pay was small and the work was hard, but she did it without complaint because there was only her, and there was only Thule, and the rent did not pay itself. She set down her cleaning bucket by the door. She took off her gray work scarf. "Thule," she called softly. "I am home." No answer. She walked across the small room. Thule's mat was in the corner, near the warm pipe that ran from the kitchen wall. He was curled up on it with his back to her. His small chest moved up and down. Senna smiled. She walked over to kiss his head. Then she saw the cut on his lip. She stopped. She did not move. She just looked down at her son's small, sleeping face in the dim lamplight. The cut was small, but it was fresh. There was a bruise on his side. His back leg, the bad one, was tucked under him at a strange angle, as if it hurt too much to stretch out. Senna closed her eyes. She had asked him before, many times. He never told her. He was afraid she would go to the school, and if she went to the school she would lose her job, and if she lost her job they would lose this room, and if they lost this room the city would take him. So he kept it inside, and she pretended not to see, because what else could she do? She knelt down beside him. She did not wake him. She only laid her hand on his small feathered mane and stroked it very softly. He sighed in his sleep. He did not open his eyes. She sat there for a long time. Then she got up, very quietly, and she walked out of the house. The square was empty. The wind was cold. The 2 moons of Harith Minor hung above the rooftops, one full and one half, both white and far away. Senna walked to the middle of the square, and she stood there alone. She looked up. She allowed herself, finally, to cry, silently, because her son was sleeping in the next room, and he must not hear. She did not see the bakery door open down the lane. She did not see the small round figure of Roz Carter step out, carrying a tray of cooling loaves to bring inside before the cold ruined them. Roz saw her. Roz stopped. Roz set the tray down on the bench beside the bakery door. And Roz, who had once been a combat medic for the 8th Wave, who had once carried wounded children through a burning hold full of smoke, recognized that particular shape of crying. She had seen it in mirrors. She had seen it on too many faces. Roz walked across the square. Her shoes made small soft sounds on the stone. She stopped beside Senna. She did not touch her. She did not speak. She just stood there. After a long time, Senna said in a voice that barely held together, "I am sorry. I will move. I did not mean to be in the way." "You are not in the way," Roz said quietly. "Stand as long as you need." Senna turned her face. She did not know this human well. She had only seen her sometimes, in the morning, with flour on her sleeves. But there was something in the woman's voice that was very old and very steady, like a wall that had held a long time. "My son," Senna said. The word broke. She tried again. "My son has a cut on his lip tonight. He is sleeping. He did not tell me." Roz nodded slowly. "Who hurt your boy?" she asked. Senna hesitated. She had never said it out loud. To say it was to make it real and dangerous and her own. But the cold wind was moving and the moons were watching, and this small gray-haired woman was standing beside her in the empty square at midnight. And for some reason Senna's mouth opened, and the words came out. She told her. About Gar the Corthel. About the 4 students. About the lunches stepped on, and the names called, and the drawings torn. About Headmaster Olin, who looked out his window, and then sat back down to his paperwork. About the teachers who looked away. About how she could not file a complaint because she would lose her job, and Vereen widows had no standing in Federation courts. She told her all of it. She had not meant to. She could not stop. Roz listened. Roz did not interrupt. When Senna was done, Roz put a hand on her shoulder. The hand was small and warm, and it shook a little with age, but it did not move away. Come, Roz said. I will walk you home. She walked Senna to her door. She made sure Senna went inside. She watched the lamp go out through the small window. Then Roz turned and walked across the square, past her own bakery, past the dark shops, all the way to the tea house at the edge of town. She did not knock at first. She stood on the porch for a moment with her eyes closed. Then she lifted her hand, and she knocked 3 times in a particular pattern. Quick, slow, quick. The door opened. Bram was already standing there. Behind him, around the table in the dim lamplight, sat Ned and Mira and Dalton. All 4 of them, as if they had been waiting. Roz stepped inside. The door closed behind her. She looked at the 4 old faces of the only family she had left in this galaxy. It is time, she said quietly. We remembered who we are. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. By dawn the rumor had not yet started, but the colony square felt strange anyway. The kind of strange that animals feel before a storm, when the air gets heavy and the small birds stop singing. A Brennick fruit seller named Ola noticed it first. She was setting up her stall in the square when she felt it. She paused with a basket of red fruit in her arms. She looked around. The morning was the same morning as always. Cold air, pale sun, the smell of bread from the lane. And yet something was wrong, or something was about to be right. She could not tell which. She set down the basket, and she did not open her stall. She just stood there, waiting. Across the square, the lights came on in the tea house. Inside, the 5 old soldiers were getting ready in silence. Not for war. They were too old for war. They were getting ready for something else, something they had not done in a very long time. Bram took off his apron. He hung it on the hook by the door. He went into the back room, and he came out wearing a long, faded gray coat. On the lapel was one small medal. He did not look at it. He never looked at it. Roz was already wearing her own coat over her flour-dusted dress. She had pinned a thin silver wing-shaped pin to her collar. The pin was the mark of a combat medic of the 8th wave. She had not worn it in 26 years. Ned came in from the porch. He had cleaned his metal walking stick. It shone a little in the lamplight. Mira touched her dog tags once. She tucked them outside her shirt, where they could be seen. Dalton was already at the door. His hands were in his coat pockets. His eyes were calm and very, very quiet. They did not speak. They stepped out of the tea house, one by one, and they began to walk. They walked slowly. They had to. Bram's hip hurt in the cold. Ned's knee was bad. Myra's back was stiff. Dalton's old shoulder injury was awake again. Roz had her own list of pains. They did not hurry. Old soldiers never hurry. But they walked together, 5 abreast, across the square, toward the academy gates. Ola the fruit seller saw them coming. She did not move. She just watched. A PLYTH shopkeeper, sweeping in front of his door, stopped sweeping. He held his broom still, and he stared. A Corthal merchant named Drev was opening the shutters on his tool shop. He saw them. He saw the way they moved. He went very still. His neighbor, a young Brennick, came up beside him. What is it, friend? They are just old humans walking. Drev did not answer at first. His scaled hands were trembling on the shutter. Those, he said softly, are not just old humans. What? That coat. Gray. With 1 medal. That is not a colony coat. That is an 8th wave coat. The Brennick laughed. 8th wave is a story. My grandfather fought against the 8th wave at Kelvin Drift, Drev said. His voice was small now. He told me how they walked. He told me what they did to the bridge. He told me how only 50 of them came down that hill, and how the whole army on the other side ran. You are joking. Look at them, Drev whispered. Look how they walk. The Brennick looked. The 5 old humans were coming closer. Not fast. Not slow. Even. Together. The way people walk who have walked into worse places than this one and come back out. The Brennick stopped laughing. By the time the 5 reached the middle of the square, half the colony was watching from windows and doorways. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everyone had stopped what they were doing. At the academy gates, the morning bell had not yet rung. Gar was already there with his 3 friends. He was leaning against the same stone post as yesterday. He was laughing about something. The smaller Corthal was acting out a limp, dragging his back foot, and the Brennick girl was holding her sides laughing. They did not see the 5 at first. They were busy. Tully was already inside the courtyard. He was sitting on the low wall near the shade tree, very small, holding his new notebook tight. His mother had not bought him a new one. He had found this one in a trash bin behind the school. The pages were a little dirty, but mostly blank. He had not drawn anything yet today. He did not feel like drawing anymore. The 5 old soldiers reached the academy gates. Gar finally turned. He saw them. He blinked. He did not understand what he was seeing. "Move," Bram said quietly. Gar stared. Then he laughed. It was a young laugh, the laugh of someone who has never been wrong about anything in his life. "Old man," he said, "did you get lost? The hospice is on the other side of town." His friends laughed too. Gar did not move from the gate. Bram did not laugh. He did not change his face at all. He stepped forward, calmly, and he lifted his cane and he set it down again on the stone with a single soft tap. The sound was not loud, but somehow every head in the courtyard turned. Tilly looked up from the wall. His eyes went very wide. Headmaster Olin came out of the office at almost a run. He was already speaking before he got there. "What is this? You cannot just walk in here. This is a school. You are not registered. You have no business here. You have to leave at once, or I will call the colony guard." He stopped when he reached them. He looked at Bram. He looked at the others. Something in their faces made his voice get smaller. "Please," he said. "Please leave." Bram did not look at him. Bram was looking past him, into the courtyard, at the small Vereen child sitting alone on the wall under the shade tree. Tilly was already starting to stand up. His back leg shook a little. He could not believe what he was seeing. Bram tapped the cane on the stone again. The sound was a little louder this time. "Step away from the boy," he said. He did not say it loud. He did not need to. Every word landed in the courtyard like a stone in still water. Gar's smile faded, just a little, for the very first time. For a moment, nothing happened in the courtyard. The wind moved the leaves of the shade tree. The morning bell had not rung. The PLYTH janitor, sweeping near the side wall, lowered his broom and did not pick it back up. Gar looked at his friends. He waited for them to laugh again. They did not laugh. The Brennick girl was staring at the ground. The PLYTH boy had backed up a half step without noticing. The smaller Corthel was looking at Gar the way a small dog looks at a bigger dog when the bigger dog is about to run. Gar did not like this. So he did what young men with no sense do. He puffed out his chest. He pushed off the stone post. He walked toward the 5 old humans like he was the one giving the order. "You old animals," he said. His voice was loud. Too loud. "Do you know what you are? You are pets. The Federation keeps you alive because they feel sorry for you. Your species is finished. You sweep our streets. You bake our bread. You drink your tea, and you die. That is all you are good for." He stopped in front of Bram. He grinned. "Now turn around and walk back to your little tea house before I call my father." Dalton stepped forward. Just one step. He did not raise his voice. He did not raise his hand. He kept his hands in his coat pockets. He looked Gar in the eye. "Son," Dalton said, "I have been polite for 40 years. Do not test what is underneath." Gar opened his mouth to answer. He could not. Something in Dalton's eyes had stopped his throat. Gar had never seen eyes like that. They were not angry. They were not cold. They were patient. The kind of patient that belongs to a man who has waited a long time for someone exactly like Gar to say exactly the wrong thing, and who is now, quietly, considering whether today is the day. The smaller Corthel turned and walked away. He did not run. He just walked, fast, out of the gate, and he did not look back. Nobody stopped him. Headmaster Olin made a small noise in his throat. "Please," he said again. "I will call the guard." Roz turned to him. She was small. The top of her head did not even reach his squid-faced shoulder. But when she turned, he flinched. "Headmaster," she said quietly. "Do you know my name?" "I do not. My name is Rosalind Carter. I was a combat medic of the 8th Wave. At the Siege of Marrow, I carried 17 wounded children out of a burning evacuation transport. 3 of them were PLYTH. I remember each of their names. I remember the color of each of their eyes. I remember which one cried for his mother, and which one held my hand, and which one died in my arms before we reached the ramp." Olin's tendrils went still. "Tell me, Headmaster," Roz said, "how many children are in this school?" I do not know exactly. I would have to check the records, but how many of them are bullied? I cannot. That is not a fair. Tell me one name." He could not. He stood there with his mouth open. He could not tell her one name. Roz did not say anything more. She just looked at him until he looked away. Mira had already left the others. She had walked very slowly across the courtyard. Her knees did not bend well anymore. She lowered herself, with effort, beside the small wall where Tuli was standing. Tuli was shaking, not from fear, from something else. Mira looked at the new notebook in his hands. She looked at the small dirty pages. She looked at his small cut lip and the bruise on his side. She did not speak right away. She just put her old hand, very lightly, on the back of his feathered mane. Then she said, "Sweet boy, will you show me your drawings?" Tuli looked at her. His eyes were wet. "They tore the old ones," he whispered. "I have not made new ones yet." "Then you will make new ones," Mira said. "And I would like to see every single one. Will you let me?" He nodded. He could not speak. She smiled at him. Her dog tags caught the morning sun. "Good boy." Bram had not moved. He was still standing in front of Gar. "Look at me, child," Bram said. Gar looked. He did not want to. He did. "You are not strong," Bram said. "I want you to understand that. Strong is not what you have been doing. Strong people protect small things. Cruel people break small things. You have been breaking. That is the mark of a small soul, son. The smallest soul in this courtyard right now is yours." Gar's jaw tightened. He wanted to say something cutting. Nothing came. "The galaxy is full of broken things," Bram went on, in the same quiet voice. "Worlds, people, children. The only choice you ever really get to make in this life is whether you protect them or whether you step on them. Most days, most beings, nobody is watching. You can step on a small thing in a corner of the galaxy and nobody will ever know. Nobody." He leaned forward a little on his cane. "We knew." Gar stepped back. "This is the last day," Bram said, "that you ever hurt this child." Ned moved then. The big old heavy armor pilot, who had once sat inside a war machine the size of a building, who had once turned a battlefield to glass in 12 minutes, walked slowly across the stones. He stopped beside the shade tree. He looked down at Tuli. He held out one large rough hand. "Come on, friend," Ned said gently. "Let us walk. The tea house has good biscuits today." Tuli looked up at him. He looked at his mother's old hallway, far away, where Senna was somewhere with a bucket and a mop. He looked at Bram. He looked at Mira beside him on the wall, nodding. Tuli slipped his small hooved hand into Ned's huge one. They walked, slowly, at the pace of the child. The old soldier and the limping boy, hand in hand, across the courtyard, out through the open gate, into the square where half the colony was watching in silence. Behind them, in the courtyard, Gar stood alone. His friends had drifted away from him. The pale white boy had quietly slipped inside the school. The brunette girl was staring at her feet. Gar looked around for someone to laugh with. There was nobody. For the very first time in his life, the young Corthel felt small. A week passed. The colony of Harith Minor was a quiet place by nature, and quiet places have long memories. The story of the 5 old humans in the courtyard moved from mouth to mouth and did not stop moving. By the 3rd day, even the trading ships that landed at the small port heard it before they finished unloading their cargo. By the 5th day, a Federation inspector arrived on a fast transport, asked very few questions, and walked into the academy with a slim folder under one arm. He stayed for 1 hour. When he came out, Headmaster Olin came out with him. Olin was no longer the headmaster. He carried a small box of his things from his desk. He did not look at anyone. He got into the transport. The transport left. Nobody saw the inspector make a phone call. Nobody asked him who had sent him. But back in the tea house, Dalton drank his tea that evening without saying a word, and Bram looked at him once across the table, and Dalton gave the smallest nod, and that was the whole conversation. Gar's family was a different matter. There was no inspector for them. There did not need to be. The Corthel community on Harith Minor was small and close, and when Drev the tool shop merchant told his neighbors what he had seen and what those gray coats meant, the shame moved through the families faster than any official letter. Within 4 days, Gar had been packed onto a freighter and sent to live with an uncle on a farming moon 2 systems away. The Brennett girl's parents transferred her to a different school. The pale white boy stopped coming to class entirely. The smaller Corthel who had run from the courtyard apologized to Tuli, in a small choked voice, on the steps of the academy, and Tuli, who was a far kinder being than the galaxy deserved, said it was all right. Tuli went back to school. Nobody bothered him. The other children, who had once looked away, slowly began to look up. The small PLYTH girl with the pale blue skin sat next to him at lunch the very first day. She did not say much. She just sat there. The next day she asked if she could see his drawings. He showed her. She told him they were the most beautiful drawings she had ever seen, and she meant it. A small wave moved through the academy after that. Other children began to ask to see his drawings too. He started taking requests. A Brennick boy asked him to draw a flying lizard. A PLYTH girl asked for a picture of her grandmother. Tully drew them all carefully, with his tongue between his teeth, and gave them away. His mother, Senna, did not work at the school anymore. Roz had offered her a job at the tea house the very next morning after the courtyard. Better pay, better hours. Senna had wept on Roz's flour-dusted shoulder for a full minute before she could say yes. Now she came to the tea house every day at sunrise, and Roz taught her how to bake bread the human way, slow and patient, with hands instead of machines. Ned built Tully a chair. He worked on it for 3 evenings in his small workshop. It was a small wooden chair, sized for a Vereen child, with a deep soft cushion on one side that was slightly thicker than the other side. It made Tully sit level when his short back leg tucked under. Ned did not tell Tully he was making it. He just brought it over one morning and set it down at the round corner table and said, "Try it, friend." Tully climbed up. He sat. His small face went still for a moment, and then it broke into the biggest smile any of them had ever seen on a Vereen child. He hugged Ned around the neck. Ned, who had once turned battlefields to glass, made a small wet sound in his throat and patted the boy on the back very gently. After that, there were 6 chairs at the round table. Tully came every afternoon after school. He sat in his chair with his new notebook. He drew the morning light coming through the dusty window. He drew Roz with flour on her sleeves. He drew Ned fixing a clock. He drew Myra's dog tags. He drew Dalton's quiet face. He drew Bram pouring tea. He filled the whole notebook. Then his mother bought him another one. Then Mira bought him another. He filled them all. The old soldiers did not speak about what had happened in the courtyard. Not once. Not even to each other. They went back to their mornings as before. Tea. Complaints about knees. Stories about nothing. The same 5 old voices in the same corner of the same lopsided blue tea house. But now a small 6th voice was in the room with them, asking questions, laughing at Roz's jokes, saying thank you in 3 languages, limping a little when he climbed down from his chair, drawing, always drawing, in the warm yellow light. One evening in the 3rd week, a stranger walked into the tea house. He was a young human, a journalist, passing through Harith Minor on his way to bigger places. He had heard a strange rumor in a spaceport bar 2 systems away. He had come to see for himself. He sat down at the counter. Bram poured him a cup. The young man looked around at the round table in the corner. He saw the 5 old humans. He saw the small Vereen child in his special chair, drawing. "Sir," the journalist said carefully, "is it true what they say? That 5 old humans walked into the academy and faced down a pack of bullies and saved a disabled alien child? Without raising a weapon? Without raising a voice?" Bram looked at him for a long moment. Then Bram smiled into his tea. "We did not save him, son," he said softly. "He saved us." "Sir, we were old," Bram said. "We were forgotten. We sat in this tea house for 14 years, and we waited to die. That small boy walked past my porch every morning. He said good morning. He said thank you. He drew our faces in his book. He reminded us, every day, what we used to be for." He paused. A soldier without something small to protect is just an old killer waiting for the end. He gave us something to protect again. That is what he did. The journalist did not write that down. He sat there with his pen in his hand, and he did not move for a long time. Outside, the sun went low over the rooftops of Harith Minor. The 2 moons were rising. The square was quiet. The tea house glowed warm and yellow in the gathering dusk. Inside, 6 figures sat around a round table. 5 old soldiers, and 1 small alien child with a bad back leg. They were laughing at something Roz had said. The galaxy outside was vast and cold and full of beings who had forgotten what mercy looked like. But in this one small wooden building, at the edge of one forgotten colony, on one quiet evening, mercy was alive. It was sitting in a chair built just for it. It was holding a pencil. It was drawing the faces of the people who loved it. And anyone in the galaxy who ever tried, ever again, to take that away, would find out exactly what humanity's old soldiers still had left in them. They were old. They were not finished. The first light of Harith Minor came slow and gray, like an old man waking up. A thin mist drifted across the empty square. Somewhere a market bell rang once, then went quiet. The colony was not awake yet. Only one small wooden building had a light on. It was a tea house, lopsided, painted a soft, faded blue, with a wooden sign that had no words on it. Just a small carving of a cup. The locals knew. The locals always knew. Bram Holloway stood on the porch with a broom in his hand. He was 71 years old. His hair was white and thin. His back was bent a little. He held the broom in one hand and a cane in the other, and he was sweeping the same patch of porch he had swept every morning for the last 14 years. He did it slowly. He had nowhere to be. He paused. He looked out across the square. The two moons of Harith Minor were still hanging in the pale sky, fading as the sun came up. Bram took a breath. The air smelled of dust, of bread from Roz's bakery down the lane, and of something far older that lived only in his memory. Smoke. Old smoke from a war the galaxy had decided to forget. He shook his head. He went back to sweeping. A bell jingled. The door of the tea house opened behind him. Roz Carter stepped out with 2 cups of tea in her hands. She was 68, small and round, with gray hair tied back in a tight knot. Flour was on her sleeves. She handed 1 cup to Bram without a word and stood beside him. They drank in silence for a while. Ned is late, Roz said at last. Ned is always late. His knee. His knee, Bram agreed. A minute later Ned Whitaker came limping across the square, leaning on a metal walking stick he had built himself out of an old engine part. He was 74. Behind him, 2 more figures appeared from different streets. Dalton Pierce, 69, tall and thin and quiet. He did not greet anyone. He just nodded and went inside. And Mira Hadley, 66, with 2 dog tags hanging at her throat. Her husband's. She had worn them every day since the funeral. All 5 of them sat at the round table in the corner of the tea house. The same table, the same chairs, the same 5 cups. They had been meeting here every morning for years now. They did not talk about the old days. They did not need to. Roz brought out warm bread. Mira complained about her hip. Ned showed Bram a small clock he was fixing. Dalton drank his tea without speaking and watched the door, because Dalton always watched the door. It was a peaceful morning, the kind of morning that earned them every breath of it. Then, through the dusty window, Bram saw a small shape coming down the road. It was a Varine child. The Varine were a gentle species, shaped a little like small deer, with soft fur and feathered manes on the back of their necks. They walked on 4 slim legs. They had large dark eyes that always looked a little sad, even when they were happy. This child had a problem with his back left leg. It was thinner than the others. It curled inward a little. He limped when he walked, and he always walked slowly, with great care, so as not to fall. His name was Thule. He was 8 years old in Varine counting. He was on his way to school, just like every morning. He carried his books in a small cloth bag tied across his back, and a lunch wrapped in green paper that his mother had made before her cleaning shift. Bram pushed his chair back. He picked up a small honey biscuit from a plate on the counter. He stepped outside. "Morning, little friend," he said. Till he looked up. His large eyes brightened. He smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Bram. Hungry?" "A little." Bram bent down with some effort and held out the biscuit. Tilly took it with both small-hooved hands. He bowed his head 3 times, the Varine way of saying thank you, then said it again out loud in 3 different languages, just in case. Bram smiled. "You have a good day at school, you hear?" "I will try, Mr. Bram." Tilly limped on. Bram watched him go. He stood there on the porch for a long time, until the small shape disappeared around the corner toward the academy. He did not move. The honey was still sticky on his fingers. Behind him, in the tea house window, 4 old faces were also watching. Bram came back inside. He sat down. He picked up his cup. The tea was almost cold now, but he drank it anyway. "That boy," Roz said softly, "is too kind for this place." "Most kind ones are," Mira said. "His leg is getting worse," Ned said. Dalton said nothing. He was looking out the window again, but this time not at the door. He was looking across the square, toward the academy gates. Bram followed his gaze. At the gates, 4 older students were standing in a small group. One of them, a young Corthel with green scales and a wide smirk, was leaning against the stone post. He was watching the road. Waiting. Bram's jaw tightened. He set down his cup very carefully. "Dalton," he said. I see them, Dalton answered. Outside, the sun rose a little higher, and little Thule, limping and tired, came closer to the gates of the school, not knowing what was waiting for him.